Welcome to the Reality Taboo, where no topic is off limits. It's February 7th, 2026. The Department of Justice has made available to the public a slew of documents, and I use that term loosely to encompass a lot of things, including those that would be traditionally conceived of as being documents, like emails and links to various articles, but also text messages and simple alerts on phones. A whole plethora of things are mixed together in this massive 3 million plus file dump that is now searchable on the Department of Justice's website. At this point, it feels like taking a thimble to the ocean, trying to scoop out enough water to make sense of everything that's in the entire ocean. So this cache of documents will be one that will be mined from and discovered and pieced together over the course of not just weeks and months, but even years. And there are a few things to frame the discussion of the Epstein file release worth mentioning before. What we're going to do here is take a look at a couple of angles, approach this from a couple of angles, and try to make sense of some of the broader implications of the existence of this publicly accessible tranche of documents. The first thing worth mentioning is a familiar theme here, and that is the inherent asymmetry of information here and how enormous that is. Though there are over 3 million documents released, there are a ton. Those documents are full of redactions, and not just redactions of names. Virtually all of the names are redacted out, and when there are, especially all of the surnames, there are a few first names here and there, but a lot of those are redacted. Almost all of the email addresses are redacted. It's more than just that, though. Much of the meat of the messages that are being communicated are also redacted. Looking through these things, you get the sense that the cryptic, ambiguous things have been left in. Everything explicit has been taken out, has been hidden from view. So we get references to wild parties, but we get redacted out what is planning on happening at those parties or what did happen at those parties. And in light of that asymmetry of information, and I think this is a broader meta point that has been reiterated multiple times to try and emphasize just how important it is for the institutional power structure, for the managerial state to maintain control, because the managerial state has access to all of the inside information, and the information that the public receives comes out in bits and pieces, and it's mixed in with bad information and incomplete information, such that if the standard is for the public, for the proles, for the plebs, for us on the outside looking in, if the standard is that we cannot make any assertions, any accusations, and more importantly, act on those assertions and accusations, if our standard that we hold ourselves to is we're not going to assume definitively anything unless we can prove it beyond any reasonable doubt, there's no way ever to, or virtually there's no way ever to convict the managerial state in the court of public opinion. One of the angles we're going to be looking at today is the famous or infamous references to pizza that will ring some bells for people who recall vaguely a decade ago a story heavily linked by the corporate media to the QAnon phenomenon about Pizzagate, and the presumption among many on the outside that in the case of the John Podesta emails that were leaked by WikiLeaks that had multiple references to pizza, slices of pizza, pizza parties, grape soda, in association with a pizza restaurant in downtown DC owned by the, quote, husband, unquote, of the owner of Media Matters, his gay partner, that at this Comet Pizza location there were disturbing pictures, lots of, quote, artwork, unquote, depicting children suffering and mutilated and in sexually compromised positions. To get a sense of the imagery here, if you have the stomach for it, query up an image search for the artist Kim Noble. John Podesta, in particular, was a big-time patron of Kim Noble. And I give it that warning about having a stomach for it for a reason, because it's going to make a lot of people nauseous upon first contact. It makes my blood boil. It evokes that famous H.L. Mencken quote about how every ordinary man can be pushed to some limit where his desire is to spit on his hands, hoist up the black flag, and just start slitting throats. The salubrious response for every woman who sees this sort of imagery is grief and a strong desire to nurture to the max in an attempt to somehow rebalance the scales of cosmic justice, and the healthy response for men who see this sort of imagery, and in particular the response directed at those who would patronize this, who would provide the resources necessary for this stuff to be created and be put out there into the world, is that such people have no redeeming value existing on the earth. To bring it back a little bit and climb down from the emotional edge, the reason it is so important for those of us on the outside looking in to not hold ourselves to an impossible standard, given the inherent asymmetry of information that exists in the system. Think about the nature of Jeffrey Epstein's alleged demise. Officially, still see this on Wikipedia, claims to be definitive by the then Attorney General, Bill Barr, who himself is very much implicated in these Epstein file releases, is that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself. He committed suicide inside of a maximum security prison while he was on suicide watch, because all of the cameras happened to stop recording, had malfunctioned at the time that he was killed, and the guards were asleep. And he's allegedly been cremated, so case closed. If we hold ourselves to the standard that, well, we can't operate as if someone came and took out, or an intelligence agency or some confluence of shadowy agents, call it the deep state for lack of a better term, we can't assume that someone or some force took out a hit on him because of the enormous number of people in organizations, and potentially even the Western Globo Homo order being implicated by the network that Epstein, if he didn't sit right in the middle of it, was an important node of, who had ongoing, continual communications with so many other powerful people in the US and in Western and Eastern Europe and in Israel. And so are we to stop now? And 7 years later, when the files, or at least some percentage of the files, are made available to the public, even though they're heavily redacted, are we supposed to ignore references to coming over to have pizza parties and delivering pizza to name redacted at a certain time, as though those sort of mundane, trivial details would be the concern of a multi-billionaire investment advisor like Jeffrey Epstein? That's what the managerial state wants, at least a significant section of that managerial state. But as was discussed in the run-up to the 2024 presidential election, the elites in the Western world are involved in an internecine conflict with some group of elites trying to supplant the more sclerotic, ensconced elite structure that seems to have been in place since at least the fall of the Soviet Union in the beginning of the 1990s. This is a potential elite inflection point, because there is a lot of potential leverage here for insurgency elites to use against the elites who are implicated in the Epstein network. It's seemingly impossible from the outside looking in to conjecture as to how that will shake out exactly. But if you're a member of the Silicon Valley elites, not in any way implicated in the Epstein network, and you have some beef with the Wall Street and political East Coast elite who are implicated, well, you just found an enormous point of leverage, because the elites who are implicated are going to be running for the hills as the online sleuths make the connections that implicate said elites, and the elites not implicated who are able to leverage that, take that sleuth found information and weaponize it against the Epstein tainted elite structure such as it is. If the tone didn't give it away, yours truly is very much of the belief that Epstein was taken out, that he did not kill himself. What would be the purpose of spending decades marshaling all of this blackmail on the most powerful people in the world to just axe yourself when you feel like the walls are closing in, instead of leveraging that massive amount of blackmail to give yourself special treatment, some sort of special exception, calling in all of the favors and being prepared to make good on all of the threats that you've spent your adult life now in your 60s accumulating. I say I believe that Epstein was taken out rather than necessarily killed, because if we're trying to handicap things and somehow we have access to what actually happened, or are able to pour truth serum down the throats of the people who are in the know definitively, I think it most likely Epstein was killed by globo homo forces that could be intelligence agencies domestically or foreign. It could be NGOs, it could be agents working on behalf of investment banks, it could be a confluence of these things. It is increasingly difficult to tell where one of those things ends and the other begins. I think that most likely, I think next most likely is that Epstein was taken out, but that he wasn't killed, he was just moved. He could have been shepherded off to some other country, like the one that sits atop the land that was 900 years ago the Christian kingdom of Jerusalem. This uncertainty is compounded massively by the mix of misinformation and real information. There are already lots of videos and images allegedly from the files on social media, but verifying the authenticity is beyond the realistic capacity of individual members of the public to do. Who has the time to verify everything? And once they do verify it or instead debunk it, well, it's already off to the next thing. The fact, too, that these images are grainy and in some cases decades old, in a world of AI image generation on the cusp of stepping out of the uncanny valley in comparison to highly digitized, high-resolution images capable of being created in 2026, taking that AI technology and applying it to images to represent fraudulently images from 20 years ago where the resolution is much lower and the ability to verify the veracity of the images is a lot more difficult. Well, that just compounds the problems with verifying authenticity that much more. This is 5th generation warfare now. It may be sprinkled in with some more kinetic Hezbollah pager style warfare as well, but the predominant battlefield is going to be the information interface. And a lot of people are going to understandably tap out, throw their hands up, say, I cannot separate fact from fiction here. I don't trust the corporate media. I don't trust random accounts on X. I barely even trust my own lying eyes because I don't know if what my lying eyes are looking at is real itself. And the managerial state is going to try to utilize that sense of befuddlement and uncertainty to double down on terms like misinformation, to shoot down claims that it will also report have been debunked. Steel men will be hidden away and straw men will be burnt to a crisp, like was the case with the Pizzagate story from 10 years ago, when the corporate media made it out as though the QAnon conspiracy was that Hillary Clinton and John Podesta were sacrificing children in the basement of this pizza place in downtown DC. And since that didn't happen, nobody said it happened, no one of good faith asserted that that's what it happened, it didn't matter. It was presented as the story of Pizzagate and everything surrounding it, and then someone shot up the place didn't kill anybody, but did do damage to the computer systems at this pizza place. And, well, wouldn't you know that this misinformation is causing violent, unhinged actors to do crazy things. So stop talking about this Pizzagate nonsense. After all, Hillary Clinton was not on her own sacrificing children to Moloch in the basement of this Comet Pizza place. I don't have a neat and packaged solution for how to contend with this avalanche of information coming in and how to wrestle with its authenticity and its meaning. It is one of the great struggles of our age, how to make sense of it and act accordingly. One way is to identify reliable sources to curate the information. While primary source data in a vacuum might be optimal, it is unrealistic for the vast majority of plebs like us to sift through. But if enough people identify, get behind, and boost those sources that are able to reliably curate the information and share it and develop a reputation for veracity, we might have a shot. It's preferable to allowing images in an X feed to wash over you, and it's certainly preferable to any of the slop peddled in corporate media or the managerial state that the corporate media acts as stenographers for. And so it is with that in mind, we're going to take a look at a couple of angles from the Epstein release. The first one has to do with how the Epstein case was portrayed by the corporate media and the managerial state until just about last week when, as we'll get to later, there became a very real political angle, a partisan angle for the Epstein story. As we'll get to in a bit, it is remarkable that this major plank of the 2024 Trump presidential campaign was the promise to shed light on the darkness that was the Epstein case, that somehow, while campaigning on it a year ago, it has now become a millstone thrown around the necks of the MAGA movement's political prospects, is a remarkable thing. But that does seem to be how this is shaking out. And so now, paradoxically almost, it seems as if there is more corporate media interest, still not a lot, but more interest in some of the contents of the Epstein files than there was not just a year ago, and let alone a year ago, but even 5-6 years ago when, in 2019, when Epstein allegedly was killed. Anyway, the way that the case and interest in the case have been portrayed is that it was problematic because it relied on anti-Semitic tropes about Zionists occupied government running the world through blackmail operations and the financialization of everything by sly Jewish banking interests. And so we turn to an email sent by Jeffrey Epstein that is very much an on-the-nose iteration of just that sort of putative trope that got the pearl clutcher so worked up about how critical it was that this not continue to be focused on because of all of the... And if we set aside any concerns about the veracity of those stereotypes, do they exist because they are slanderous mendacity, or do they exist because they more or less get at important truths that help people understand the way that the world works? If we set that question aside, then we can see why there would be concern about focus on Epstein reinforcing these negative stereotypes, because here is Epstein, in his own words, doing exactly that. From an email in October of 2009 sent from Jeffrey Epstein to someone else whose name is redacted, quote, and there's going to be the bracketed sick here inserted silently on multiple occasions because the grammar and spelling and syntax and punctuation is atrocious. Quote, "This is the way the Jew make money. and made a fortune in the past 10 years, selling short the shipping futures. Let the goyim deal in the real world," unquote. And Epstein writes this, followed by what looks to be an excerpt from an article that he was pointing to, or some sort of communication that he was pointing to. That communication reads, quote, "The most dramatic growth has been in shipping futures, which allow shipping companies to lay off risks. The most popular futures are forward freight agreements to deliver goods on a particular route at some point in the future. They have grown in the past year to be roughly the size of the physical market, according to Bill Lyons of the Baltic Exchange, a shipping bazaar in London that sells FFAs. Many in the industry have been suspicious of such futures because they have been averse to hedging their bets. Risk-taking is, after all, part of the game, and averse to complicated financial instruments that they do not really understand," unquote. Running that in a Brave or a Google search doesn't bring up any results, however, so piecing it together, it looks like Epstein was quoting something else, but mixing his own commentary in with those quotes from an article, or it may have been just information that he was sent from someone else that he was then incorporating into his own characterization of what he had been doing. But whatever the originating source and whatever the recipient of the message, the mindset here is quite clear. Epstein, who refers to himself as the Jew who make money, is going to do so by manipulating financial markets so that they can fleece the goyim who deal in the real world. So yes, it is a 4chan trope that Jews manipulate financial markets while Gentiles do the actual production, and then the Gentiles are robbed blind because they can't keep up with the sophisticated financial shenanigans being perpetrated against them. As I just alluded to, reading through his text messages and emails is giving me a stroke. Epstein comes off, frankly, as semi-literate. Misspellings are everywhere, syntax is garbled, the punctuation is absurd, there's some changing number of commas that serve as ellipses here and there, sometimes it's 2, sometimes it's 10, there's random spacing, there is the use of the word there, THERE, when referring to the possessive of a group of people, when it should be spelled THEIR. This isn't hyperbolic or embellishing on my account. Look for yourself at the Department of Justice's database. Pick some things out randomly that are from Epstein directly, and it is unavoidable. It seems to give lie to the idea that the West is based on some sort of merit system where the best always rise to the top. So much of his communications are instead about connections and networking and leveraging influence, and what seems to get people to the top. And then the blackmail is a great way to leverage that influence, but what you don't get a sense of in reading any of Epstein's communications, whether they be texts, messages, or emails, or alert reminders that he set for himself, is that he a deeply intelligent and thoughtful person, clever like a fox and ruthless as a hyena maybe, but not a deep intellect, to put it mildly. The other topic to take a look at today will be results on searches for the full rendering of the word that is everyone's favorite in Scrabble, that can be shortened to ZA, Z-A, because unloading your Z for 10 points simply by finding an open A feels so good, especially at crunch time towards the end of the game. There are 845 results returned for pizza. To avoid cherry picking them, I'm going to go through the first 10 non-repeating hits that come before Epstein's arrest. And that is another thing to be aware of in this 3 million plus data dump, with millions of more files promised to be released at some point in the future, is that things that came in, the FBI had an open tips line, and there were other ways that people could contact the Department of Justice with things related to the Epstein case, and the things that came in after he had been arrested and his case was high profile and he allegedly committed suicide, however it was that he disappeared from the cell, got killed, whatever the case was. After that, there was a flood of tips and claims of things involving Epstein and people connected to Epstein that came flooding in that may contain some nuggets of truth within them, but sussing out what those are is like searching for a needle in a haystack, because anyone with a political axe to grind had an opportunity, or so they perceived. I think retrospectively, it looks like the intelligence agencies weren't actually that interested in getting to the bottom of what happened to Epstein and why it happened. But the presumption at the time would be that this is a big story, and implicating your enemies or having implicated, or the presumption of implication of nefarious acts by those you don't like, or just manifestations of Trump derangement syndrome or genuine anti-Jewish sentiments. These things came flooding in to the FBI and other intelligence and justice agencies. And in a sane and just world, those things would be filtered through, and the legitimate information would be followed up on and investigated, and the false information would be punished as criminal activity, as effectively filing a false police report. But that's well beyond the scope of the layman to try to make sense of, try to sift through, given that there's certain to be much more chef than wheat. Before I do get into the pizza hits, though, another aside worth mentioning is that, as we alluded to previously, the ability for AI to create or fabricate, as the case may be, images and video and text relating to the Epstein document dump. It seems like AI could also be trained on these millions and millions of documents. And if the AI training is not corrupt, then the information gleaned from everything involved in the Epstein case, at least everything that's being made public, that a lot of that work that's going to come together through trial and error painfully over the next months and years could happen a lot more quickly. And of course, that could be enhanced enormously by getting rid of all of the redactions. And on Tucker Carlson's show, Ian Carroll said he is working on just that sort of thing. So here is to hoping that it comes together. Okay, so the first 10 results having to do with pizza, the first 10 hits that are non-recurring that come back. The very first one is from 2015. It is from someone whose name is redacted, saying, "Mr. Epstein would like to see the menu from the pizza place. Could someone send it, please?" Interestingly, the word place is spelled PLA equals sign E instead of just PLACE. On a QWERTY keyboard, the C is at the middle finger of the left hand is where you type it, and the equal sign is at the pinky finger of the right hand, almost on totally opposite sides of the keyboard. So it's a weird typo to make, but that's how it's presented. And there is, above that message, there's a URL referenced that is pizzaamorestomas.com. I took a look at that URL, and it currently has a very Semitic looking picture of Sam Hyde as a chef with holding a pizza and grape crush. And it's set up with a shopping cart and menu items, kind of like a faux, simple Shopify page. And the caption underneath Hyde's picture reads, "Mamma mia, this has gotten too spicy. Contact our head chef, Samalo Hyde, for any special orders." Funny that he got there and purchased the URL and put that up, but it also raises the question of why there is a URL talking about pizza that is now owned by Sam Hyde, presumably. Looking at the Wayback Wind Machine, the Internet Archives, I see that it looks like prior to 2022, when the domain hosting expired, that it was for a logistics company based out of New York. Pizza Amores Thomas is a weird name for a logistics company. There is also the same URL with VI, maybe for the Roman numeral 6, or maybe just V, added at the end, that does appear to be the website of a pizzeria in New York. That is, it says at the bottom, humorously enough, the website is, quote, proudly maintained by Mr. Burns, unquote. Anyway, this is all pretty weird. The idea that people would be communicating back and forth innocuously with Jeffrey Epstein about procuring pizza orders, wanting to see the menu for pizza places. This isn't like this was happening in 1969. This email is from 2015. Feels like yesterday to me. I guess I am getting kind of old, but that was not like pre-internet age or something. It was not at all unusual for every restaurant in existence to have its menu available online for anybody to look at any time. And so sending messages back and forth to a multi-millionaire, 100-millionaire, maybe even billionaire about looking at the menu for a pizza parlor down the road is something that really strains credulity that it is what it appears to be on the surface. The next one, again from 2015. Heads up, Jeffrey wants you to go get pizza today from Patsy's Pizza when he comes back from Woody's around 12:30. I can order and you pick up. Patsy's Pizza, 61 West 74th off Columbus. I am told they can get pizza ready in 15 minutes! ! Unquote. Maybe this is a really diligent assistant making sure that someone else is able to get lunch for the boss, and it's a multi-person coordination where one person has to talk about ordering it and the other person will pick it up so that they can both have it back when Jeffrey Epstein gets back from meeting with Woody Allen. Again, very strange. Innocuously, maybe it's that the uber wealthy live in ways much different than the rest of us, and so this is more or less standard fare where your assistants make sure that your every want and need, your desire for a lunchtime pizza is ready in 15 minutes, ready to go when you're back home, ready for it. The third return is a petty cash ledger with a bunch of routine charges that ran from 2006 to 2007, including multiple charges to Papa John's. This is, it must be admitted, evidence against the out-of-place nature of pizza references in other communications in this data dump, because this looks pretty standard. There are other grocery charges, car wash charges, and the like, dry cleaning, that sort of thing. And then there's some charges for meals, in the $15 range at Papa John's. The fourth return is from June of 2016, and it is a phone alert that is set to just say Pizza Stone. That's it. It's cryptic, very weird. There's no redacted. It's redacted who it is to, who it's from. It looks like it's an alert that was set by someone for himself or herself. We don't know who it is. We just have that alert that's supposed to go off saying Pizza Stone. The fifth return is from May of 2017. Quote, order pizza for Bobby Slayton. Then 2.5 hours later, another message in that same thread that says, alert, send pizza to Bobby, ! Unquote. From Wikipedia, I hadn't heard the name before. Bobby Slayton, born 1955, is an American actor, writer, and stand-up comedian, known for a supporting role in the 2001 film Bandits and as a frequent guest on The Adam Carolla Show. He has also made guest appearances on multiple sitcoms and animated shows. And the first sentence in the personal life section of the Wikipedia entry, apropos of nothing, probably, is that Slayton was raised in a Jewish home and often jokes about his Jewish ethnicity. Anyway, it seems like it was a pretty nice gesture for Epstein. Presumably Epstein, again, the names are redacted, but maybe an agent acting on behalf of Epstein made sure that Bobby Slayton got his pizza. Because a well-established professional comedian's not going to just be able to buy a pizza on his own anytime he wants. He needs a well-connected billionaire friend to buy him and send him pizza as a pick-me-up in the middle of a long day or an evening between sets at the Laugh Factory. The sixth entry is from September of 2015. Subject, your pizza is, and this is in all caps, yummy, yummy, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Thank you for the pizza today. Really good, exclamation mark, exclamation mark, XO, exclamation mark, emoticon, smiley face. Again, the names are redacted. This must be to or from or in some way reference a chef of some sort, because it would be odd to send a message of effusive praise about a store-bought pizza that one person purchased for another. The seventh entry is from June of 2013. Hi, Ben. Great game today. Wanted to check and see if you might be available for a pizza party next Sat, short for Saturday, after the friendly Darien game we are having. It's been difficult trying to find a time the most people are available to participate, but it seems like next Sat is the best for most. Please let me know. Thanks. And then the person responding replies, quote, yes, that is fine. Can't wait, unquote. Darien is a town in Connecticut. It has a high school, presumably their little league sports teams with the name Darien Eagles, whatever. The subject line is U9, which is in Little League terminology, those under 9. So a league for kids who are 7 or 8 years old. Anyway, the subject is U9 Red Pizza Party. This one could be innocuous. It could be a little better disguised, though, also a better disguised reference to some of the other cryptic, weird stuff that we've been going through up to this point. Not sure why it's in here. The email addresses are redacted, but it seems not to have anything directly to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Epstein doesn't have any children or grandchildren, at least that are publicly known about, and so for him to be involved in setting up pizza parties for youth sports teams is weird, but if this doesn't involve him, why it's even in the documents is unclear. It could be made more clear by getting rid of the redactions of who it's to and who it's from, but as it stands currently, that's what's available. That's what's being presented. The eighth is from November of 2016. This is Jeffrey Epstein. Quote, all Yankee paintball, period, or ellipsis, abbreviated ellipsis, confirm, ask about ammo, pizza, unquote. Yankee paintball does appear to be a real place in Connecticut. This could also potentially be innocuous, though it is worth asking why a man in his 60s is interested in paintball. The not-so-innocent explanation is that trafficked kids aren't just treated like chattel slaves all the time, so it's not inconceivable this could be part of some sort of grooming process. Or maybe Epstein really was just a young kid at heart who liked to eat pizza and go paintballing on the weekends. The ninth one from May of 2017, it's another alert set up on a phone or some other sort of personal device. Reading, quote, 4 p.m., Jojo to buy Artero's pizza and deliver to 301, exclamation mark. 4 p.m., Jojo to buy Artero's pizza and deliver to 301, exclamation mark. Unless the person involved, whether it's Epstein or not, is running a pizza parlor inside of a hotel, delivering pizza to rooms, say room 301 at 4 in the afternoon. Unless that's what's going on, this almost certainly has to be cryptic. This cannot possibly be the literal meaning. Set for somebody to go buy pizza and then take it to whoever Jojo is at 4 in the afternoon. Pizza places don't need third-party runners. They have delivery people. Unless, like, Uber Eats somehow got mixed in with the Epstein files. This one smells like sulfur. The 10th one is June of 2016. Quote, ask Jason and Lawton if July 2 works for pizza party at Feeney's. If it actually involved planning a meal at a pizza place, I think normal people just say, we'll go get pizza or have pizza at this time, something to that effect. Most adults don't use the term pizza party. That smacks of innocence. But for a grown adults to speak that way smacks of a sort of exaggerated, dare I say, pedophilic or at least homosexually coded way of talking about pizza, or maybe like a Miss Rachel adults talking at an exaggerated child's level, talking about let's go have a pizza party for people connected to a multi-hundred millionaire or billionaire financial guy in his 60s to be talking about pizza parties seems very obviously out of place. So make of those first 10 entries what you will. It doesn't sound particularly organic, and honestly, communications about eating pizza in general doesn't seem especially organic, or more accurately, doesn't seem especially literal. But people do post pictures of half-eaten sandwiches on their social media pages, and in the enlightened hedonism of the current year, building up anticipation and excitedly sharing things about meals that people have had are not totally foreign. And so for using that reasonable doubt framework again, I think there is some possibility that there is a justified explanation for all of these emails. It would help if that were the case, though. If that were the case, it would help clarify by getting rid of all the redactions. If it's just people talking, Little League coaches somehow connected to Epstein, somehow in his network, talking about setting up a pizza party after next weekend's game, then why does the information there need to be partially redacted? A text message exchange, though, with Jeffrey Epstein and his urologist, a person named Harry Fish, that Tucker Carlson highlighted this week, is, even if we are maximally generous, hard to write off as being related to what it literally would seem to be related to. This from April of 2018. Epstein says, "I'm back. Can you call in Stendra 100 at Zetomir?" Fish responds with, "How many?" Epstein with 10. And then Epstein again, "They didn't have your call yet?" Fish responds to him, "You have refills available. Call them back." Epstein responds, "Thanks." Then, "They want you to call." Then Fish says, "I just did. You can pick them up now. After you use them, wash your hands and let's go get pizza and grape soda. Call me." Stendra is a prescription medication used to treat ED, to treat erectile dysfunction in men. It is along the lines of Viagra. It's one of those types of pills. And Epstein wants 10 called in, and then as soon as he gets them, he and the urologist who called in the prescription for him to have it filled, they're going to wash their hands and then go get pizza and grape soda. Okay, maybe the doctor, the urologist, is really concerned about Epstein's health, wants to make sure that he's not eating with dirty hands. Now, if you're concerned about Epstein's health, it would seem like you might try to dissuade him from eating pizza and drinking grape soda. Not generally advice that dietitians or personal health coaches or physicians would give to their clients if they're concerned about maintaining their health. Those sarcastic qualifications aside, the read yours truly has on this is that the idea that the Western world is ruled by a bunch of satanic pedophiles just doesn't seem that far off the mark. If it makes you more comfortable to strip out any of the spiritual connotations here, then maybe nihilistic sadists are the ones who get to the top psychopathically through ruthless self-promotion and status positioning. But I think the ultimate purpose here is about destroying innocence. It is the hallmark of the culturally decadent globo homo world we live in, where porn is ubiquitous, exploring sexuality is encouraged, mocking those who put children at the forefront of concerns is standard fare.
Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
Think of the children. Won't somebody please think of the children?
No, stop. Think of the children.
Think of the children. Oh, won't somebody please think of the children?
And abortion is practically a sacrament, something to be almost celebrated. Coming to that conclusion, of course, like caring about Epstein at all, is an anti-Semitic trope. A blood libel, you might even say. Blood libel is, the search engines and Wikipedia will tell you, that's another anti-Semitic trope, where it's anti-Semitic tropes all the way down, turtles all the way to the bottom. It's a practice that traces all the way back to the Canaanites and to Moloch. The ADL was founded in the wake of a blood libel case where a 13-year-old Irish Catholic girl named Mary Fagan was assaulted and murdered by Leo Frank, who then tried to pin the murder on a black janitor who worked in the factory he owned. And in the horribly racist South, this happened in Georgia, a white jury wouldn't buy it and said instead that it was the wealthy Jew who did it, not the black janitor who was scapegoated for the murder. So maybe it is part of an ongoing tale of tears about a group of people who are the most put upon in world history, who keep being accused of doing things they didn't do and hated by people just for the mere act of existing, because it's in the DNA of the goys to feel that way. Or it could be another instance in a long line of a population crying out as it strikes you. Or a Knox-Alt subset. The idea that not all Jews are like that is obviously true, but the organized tendencies, the patterns that exist over time are what they are. I'll close out by talking about what was mentioned earlier about the politics of the Epstein case and the Epstein document dump that has taken place this week. It is wild. It was a pillar of the 2024 Trump campaign. Many of the people, including Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, who were the number 1 and number 2 at the FBI, campaigned on behalf of Trump and put themselves in positions of leadership in the intelligence agencies on the promise of getting to the bottom of the Epstein cover-up. And now we have, from a YouGov poll released this week, bipartisan affiliation to the question, quote, "Do you think the government is covering up evidence it has about Jeffrey Epstein?" unquote. Among Democrats, 85% say yes, it's covering things up still. Among independents, 69%. Among Republicans, the party that wouldn't let the Epstein story die for the better part of the last decade, just 36% say that they think that the government is covering up evidence it has about Epstein. And so how the GOP and the Trump administration has managed to fumble this thing so disastrously from a political perspective is a topic for another day that deserves a deeper study of how to mismanage a political asset so spectacularly that it becomes the millstone that drowns you in the subsequent midterms after the election that you used it to win with. That'll do it for us this week. Thanks for listening. We'll talk to you next time.